Think about your life for a second. Now, what if I told you that hitting your 13th birthday, that was considered a huge deal? Like you'd lived a long, full life. Sounds crazy, right? Well, for one of our earliest ancestors, that was just reality. We're about to dive into the story of a species whose life was so short, so incredibly dangerous. It's honestly a miracle we're even here to talk about it.
I mean, just let that sink in. Their one job for the entire day was just don't die. This wasn't some hypothetical idea. This was the brutal day in, day out reality for one of our direct ancestors. And weirdly enough, their short, violent lives are a huge part of why we exist today. But that brings up a massive question, right? How does a species even continue if almost nobody makes it to their teens?
So to figure this out, we've got to put on our detective hats. We're going to be sifting through clues from millions of years ago, trying to solve this incredible mystery. Why did an entire species of early humans basically never grow up? And our entire investigation kicks off with one single, really shocking number. Yeah, 12.8 years. That wasn't just for some unlucky individuals. That was the average age of death for the entire species of Homo habilis. Think about that. A long life for them was barely even being a teenager. So the big question is, how in the world can we possibly know something so specific? Well, our whole case file opens with the very first clue ever discovered. Okay, so our first clue. The case officially cracked open on November 4th, 1960, deep in Tanzania. You've got this young guy, Jonathan Leakey, digging out in the baking African sun, and he stumbles onto something that would completely rewrite a massive chapter of human history. So Jonathan finds a jawbone, and pretty soon his parents, who just happen to be the legendary Louis and Mary Leakey, they jump in and start finding more. Little bits of a skull, and then this is the crucial part, 21 bones from a single hand. And as they start putting these ancient puzzle pieces together, a picture of a totally new kind of early human starts to take shape. And when you look at the evidence, it's a total puzzle. On one hand, this individual died when they were only about 11 or 12 years old, a kid. But on the other hand, its brain was way bigger than an ape's, and its hands were almost human. They were capable of the kind of delicate, precise movements you need to make tools. So you have a tool maker who died as a child. This bizarre mix is exactly what led to its name. And that's what they called it, Homo habilis, which literally means handyman. This was the very first member of our own genus Homo. But here's the thing. As more and more of these skeletons started turning up, the mystery just got deeper. That first discovery, it wasn't just a one-off tragedy. No, it was a terrifying pattern. What was going on? Why were all these clever handymen dying so incredibly young? So to crack this case wide open, scientists knew they needed more than just a few skeletons. They had to go bigger, from looking at individual victims, if you will, to a full-blown species-wide investigation. And the biggest clue, the smoking gun, was hidden in the last place you might expect, their teeth. So this paleoanthropologist, Laura Monica Martinez, she takes on the case. And she gathers this massive amount of evidence. We're talking 116 teeth from 20 different Homo habilis individuals. Her mission, basically, was to use cutting-edge forensics to perform an autopsy on an entire species that disappeared more than 1 million years ago. Pretty cool, right?
Okay, so how in the world do you figure out how old a creature was from a tooth that's almost 2 million years old? Well, it's like a 3-step forensic analysis. First, you look at the enamel erosion. How much has it been worn down over time? Step 2, you get out a microscope and you literally count the tiny, tiny scratches from all the chewing they did. And finally, step 3, you take all that data and you compare it against everything we already know about other hominins and what the environment was like back then. It's an incredibly detailed process, and the results, well, they were conclusive and honestly really disturbing.
The results were just wow. The average age of death came out to, you guessed it, 12.8 years. The oldest one they could find, just 25. And not a single one, not one, made it to 30. And you have to remember, this study didn't even include the baby teeth from the really young kids because their tiny bones almost never survived to become fossils. So the real average age was probably even lower. This was a species living right on the edge of extinction. So what on earth was killing them all? All the evidence, every single clue, started pointing to one terrifying conclusion. Homo habilis was born into a world that was just brutally hostile. It was a world built for monsters. And the worst part? They were stuck with a body that was completely, totally unprepared to survive in it. It was like they were dealt a terrible hand, genetically speaking. I mean, first off, they were tiny, barely 4 feet tall, making them bite-size for predators. Their brain was bigger, yeah, but that just meant it sucked up a ton of energy without yet being smart enough for things like, complex strategy. And to make it worse, they were terrible runners, couldn't go far, couldn't go fast, and they were clumsy climbers too. They were stuck in this awful evolutionary middle ground where they weren't good on the ground or in the trees. They were just slow and vulnerable, everywhere. And everywhere they looked, monsters were waiting.
Let's run down the list of suspects, shall we? Suspect number 1, the giant hyena. We're not talking about the ones you see in documentaries. This thing was taller than a person, hunted in massive packs, and had jaws that could snap mammoth bones like they were twigs. For a 4-foot-tall habilis, yeah, that's not a fight you're gonna win.
Okay, next up on our monster list, a predator that was basically designed to kill primates, the saber-toothed cat, Hyenas. And those giant teeth weren't for slicing meat, they were built to shatter skulls. But here's the truly terrifying part. It could climb trees. So, yeah, there was literally nowhere to hide. But the real apex predator, the undisputed king of this nightmare landscape, was the mossback lion. This thing was a 500-kilo monster. That's over 1,000 pounds, twice the size of a modern lion. They hunted in big, coordinated packs and could run almost 3 times faster than a habilis at full sprint. Escape just wasn't an option, ever. Think about this. Even something as simple as getting a drink of water was a life-or-death gamble. Lurking at the water's edge was an 8-meter crocodile. That's 26 feet. And we know they were hunting our ancestors because we've literally found habilis foot bones with crocodile bite marks on them. They couldn't even get a drink safely. But the monsters weren't just the giant predators. A new, more dangerous threat was rising from inside their own family. Homo habilis wasn't just being eaten into extinction. They were also being, outcompeted. The final clue that solves this entire case is the arrival of a new model, you might say. A taller, stronger, and much, much smarter human ancestor. And that was Homo erectus. You just have to look at the tail of the tape. In every single category that mattered for survival, erectus was just better. A bigger brain, a taller, more powerful body, way more advanced tools. And get this, they were elite endurance runners. And of course, they had the ultimate game changer. They could control fire. Poor Homo habilis never stood a chance. They just couldn't keep up. So it's really easy to look back at the story of Homo habilis and just see a failure, right? Like a flawed prototype in the grand scheme of human evolution, one that was always going to go extinct. But that's absolutely the wrong way to see it. Their short, brutal, violent lives weren't a failure. They were an absolutely critical, totally necessary first step. Because what their desperate struggle for survival proved was a fundamental truth about what it means to be human. See, in a world filled with these massive, terrifying monsters, we weren't going to survive by having bigger claws or sharper teeth. No, we survived and eventually took over the whole planet because of our brains, our ability to work together, and our knack for making tools. Homo habilis was that first brave little spark of ingenuity in a world of overwhelming darkness. They couldn't keep the flame going on their own, but they were the ones who lit it. And it was Homo erectus who took that tiny spark and fanned it into a fire that would one day spread across the entire globe. Their whole existence was a battle against very real physical monsters with teeth and claws. And that battle forced an evolutionary leap. It pushed us towards intelligence. And that really makes you wonder, doesn't it? As we face our own modern monsters, things like global pandemics, climate change, and misinformation, what kind of evolutionary pressures are those putting on us? What are we evolving into right now?